Hey everybody. Like I said, I'm probably not going to be here on Thursday. So I just wanted to make this quick video going over the Unit 4 study guide, um, just so you have it as a resource and can work on it. So number one, how was slavery driving a wedge between the country throughout the 1850s? I mean, how was slavery not driving a wedge throughout the country? As long as you say something along the lines of how how slavery was dividing the country between North and South, sectionalism, spreading west as westward expansion was continuing into the 1850s. The pervading question of the day was what territories will allow slavery, what territories will not allow slavery, how will that be decided, and what are the amplifications of that. So there's really a number of things you could say to answer number one. Um, Number two, how did the Transcontinental Railroad lead to the creation of new states? You know, there was talk early on in the 1840s, maybe even before, about building a railroad that would lead from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast. And that especially became more and more likely since by this time we had acquired that territory. By the 1850s, we expanded from Atlantic to Pacific. Um, and those territories that were not yet turned into states yet, like Kansas and Nebraska, for example, they needed to be better organized and um, they needed to have state governments in place in order to make building a transcontinental railroad more smooth and being able to run lines through their states. Um, so as people would settle into these territories more, that would lead to these territories eventually applying for statehood. So something along those lines. Um, Three is pretty easy. What do William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and John Brown all have in common? They were all big time important abolitionists. Um, Four, explain the importance of cotton in the pre Civil War South. Cotton was king. There's a reason why South Carolina Senator Henry Hammond gave that speech in 1858. It was the backbone of the Southern economy. Um, Cotton was the biggest cash crop in the South, and as we know, slavery was the economic system that the South relied on. Um, so as long as you say something close to that. Um, what were the terms of the Compromise of 1850? Make sure you know these specific terms. This was in the 4.3 notes PowerPoint. Um, there's three or four things, right? One, California is admitted as a slave state. Sorry, as a free state. The slave trade will be eliminated in Washington D.C. The Nevada territory, New Mexico, I can't remember which one of those two. They'll decide on slavery by using popular sovereignty. I'm missing one, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's on the 4.3 PowerPoint, so make sure you check that out. Get all the terms of the Compromise of 1850 placed here. How did it? Oh, yeah, the biggest one, Fugitive Slave Act, which big one there. How did the Compromise of 1850 further divide the nation? Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act was the most divisive thing about the Compromise of 1850. That was the big thing that the South got out of it. Big thing the North got out of it was California being admitted as a free state. Big thing the South got out of it was the Fugitive Slave Act. We talked about how that made previously ambivalent Northerners who didn't really care either way about slavery kind of won them over to the abolitionist cause because this meant that slave catchers would come into the North and potentially kidnap free Black Americans, many of whom had integrated into Northern society at the time. These were farmers, these were neighbors, friends, maybe even family to these people. So it divided the nation because it led to people being led to many Northerners kind of taking up the abolitionist mantle, the anti-slavery mantle, which obviously, that's a good impact that it had in the North. In the South, the good impact that it had for the South was that, it was protecting the institution of slavery. All right. 7, explain how the Dred Scott decision led to further sectionalism. This is in the 4.4 PowerPoint. Remember the Dred Scott case. Chief Justice Roger Taney and the Supreme Court said that Dred Scott was not even a person; he was property, right? Because he was a Black American, he was a slave. And that opened the West up to potentially being open to slavery. Really made abolitionists even more militant than they were becoming at the time, because people were starting to get desperate. They were feeling like only bloodshed would eventually end slavery, which obviously led to more sectionalism between North and South. 8, we'll talk about this on the 4.5 PowerPoint, which is going to be tomorrow, but for y'all will have already heard it through me. We'll have already done this in class. Why did the South secede following Lincoln's election? They thought that he wanted to end slavery throughout the entire country. They saw him as a threat to slavery, despite the fact that in 1860 he ran on the platform of not letting slavery expand into Western territories. He didn't run on ending slavery everywhere, but that's why they seceded. 9, identify how the California Gold Rush created an economic opportunity for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs being, people seeking out wealth, either through making or creating small businesses or whatever. California Gold Rush was like the economic opportunity, right? The opportunity to strike quick, strike rich quick. This led to thousands and thousands of people rushing into California in the late 1840s, early 1850s, to try to, find that gold and make a quick fortune. 10, what does Manifest Destiny refer to? America has a God-given right to expand from coast to coast. It's our providence, right? It's our God-given right to expand from coast to coast. We have the right to expand westward because we have the power to do so. Therefore, we can. 11, what were the terms of the Kansas-Nebraska Act and how did it lead to further sectionalism? This is in the 4.4 PowerPoint. The Kansas and Nebraska territories were divided up into 2 territories, Kansas and then Nebraska. And they would vote on allowing slavery at the state level, popular sovereignty, which is what Stephen Douglas was advocating for. How did that lead to further sectionalism? The North was pissed because they were going to have potentially slavery above the 3630 Missouri Compromise line. And the South, well, they were actually kind of getting a pretty good deal out of this because before this, the Missouri Compromise was kind of like the law of the land when it came to, slavery and expansionism. So it said that potentially, if the people vote for it, slavery can extend above that 3630 Missouri Compromise line. How did the gold rush affect California's statehood? We talked about this earlier. The more people rushed to an unorganized territory, the quicker it had to get organized, and the quicker that it could apply for statehood, because you had to have so many people living in a territory in order for them to first apply for statehood. 13, immigrants of what nationality faced nativism in the American West during the Manifest Destiny era? Asian Americans, specifically Chinese. Chinese Americans were instrumental in helping build the Transcontinental Railroad, and they faced an immense amount of nativism and racism in the American West. There's even been an uptick in anti-Asian hate crimes today in America. So, we can kind of like tie that into the nativism that they faced in the 1840s, 1850s, and even into the 1870s as the Railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad was still being built and eventually opened. Why was annexation of Texas so controversial in the 40s? Because, remember, Texas won their independence from Mexico. They wanted to become a U.S. state. They wanted to be annexed, to be brought into the country. And if they were going to do so, that would lead to another big slave state coming into the Union. That would upset the slave state, free state balance. That's why it was very controversial. The North saw this as a slave state conspiracy to get more congressional power, which it kind of was. 15, what commodity or institution led to the spread of cotton farming in the first half of the 19th century? That's about as easy as it gets, folks. It's slavery. As slavery expanded with the creation of the cotton gin, which led to cotton becoming more of a cash crop and being more widely produced. Why did many Southerners favor the Compromise of 1850? that big Fugitive Slave Act. That was the big concession that the North gave and that the South got. You know, it made it illegal to aid runaway slaves and to, harbor them, to house them, feed them, whatever. It made it illegal to do so, and it made it legal for slave catchers to go into the North and, capture runaway slaves and sell them back into slavery in the South. Why did President James K. Polk ask for a declaration of war against Mexico? There's the right answer to this, and then there's the kind of like hint, hint, wink, wink answer. Remember, like I said when we talked about the Mexican-American War, Polk ordered American troops into that disputed territory on the border of Texas and Mexico, kind of telling them, don't shoot first, but try to provoke an action for Mexico to fire upon you so that I can justify declaring war against Mexico. And remember, Polk was the expansion president. He was the westward expansion manifest destiny president. That was the whole big thing he ran on, was acquiring Texas, trying to acquire California, and then settling the Oregon Territory dispute with England. So why did he ask for a declaration of war? Because American troops were killed on what he called American soil, but also because he was wanting to goad Mexico into a war because he was confident that America would win it. All right, 18. Why did the Wilmot Proviso die in Congress? David Wilmot was a Northern congressman, so who's in the House of Representatives. He proposed that, okay, we'll support the Mexican-American War if all the territory that we get from it, the Mexican cession, all those territories we get from Mexico after the war through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, if we can make all of that territory free, we'll support it. That was the Wilmot Proviso. Why did it die? Because the South said absolutely not. No, we want that territory to be open to slavery. And keep in mind that, things have to pass the House and the Senate. It passed the House, did not pass the Senate. So that's why it died. How did the outcome of the Mexican-American War lead to further sectionalism? Because, remember, like I was talking about up here with number 17, this is new territory that's getting added into the Union, right? Eventually, it's going to get organized into states. Will those states be free states? Will they be slave states? Back and forth between the North and South. That's the common theme. 20, how did Manifest Destiny lead to the Mexican-American War and thus further sectionalism? If a lot of these questions sound very similar, that's because they are. And it's because that's the big overarching theme, right, in this unit. Manifest Destiny, westward expansion. As we go further and further west, more territory is opened up for statehood. Will those states be free or slave states? That really matters a lot, and especially for congressional power. So Manifest Destiny, remember, we have a God-given right to expand from coast to coast, from Atlantic to Pacific. We wanted that territory, right? We wanted California. We had already annexed Texas by this point, but we wanted Texas, right? We got it. We wanted California. We wanted all that territory. Modern-day states of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona. So that opens up more territory potentially for slavery. We know that's the big dividing issue of the day between North and South. That's how it leads to more sectionalism. 21, there's a number of compromises that you can look to here. So how did political compromises over slavery fail? Good gracious. You could go all the way back to the Great Compromise at the Constitutional Convention for this. You could go to the 3/5 Compromise, also at the Constitutional Convention. You can look at the Missouri Compromise in 1820, Compromise of 1850, Kansas-Nebraska Act, right? They all failed because ultimately you can't just keep kicking the can down the road when it comes to slavery. And ultimately, we're going to realize that, and that's why we fight the Civil War. All right. So as long as you say something similar to that for your answer, that's good enough for me. All right. That's it for me. If you have questions about anything like this, email me or whatever. Make sure you review for the test Friday the 30th, this Friday. And if you have questions, let me know. Thanks.